Usually when we talk about a song or like going to a concert, there's this expectation of a very clear boundary.
Right, yeah, like a distinct line between the artist and the crowd.
Exactly. Think about the last time you bought an album or just hit play on your phone.
Hmm.
The song starts, you listen for 3 minutes, the song ends, and, you move on.
Yeah, it's a neatly packaged product. You consume it.
Right. It's a transaction. You're the audience. The music is the entertainment being delivered to you. And the whole experience is just, well, it's clean, it's predictable, and fully contained.
And, I mean, that transactional model is basically the foundation of the modern music industry. It relies entirely on that separation between the creator up on the stage and the consumer down in the crowd.
But imagine stepping into a musical landscape where those boundaries just completely dissolve. Today, we're exploring how art transformed from like a packaged product on a shelf into a living, breathing environment that you literally inhabit.
It's a huge shift.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a fascinating column from Monumental Movement Records, or MMR, titled Grateful Dead in San Francisco, complete record of the music community born of the counterculture.
Yeah, and the mission here is really to figure out how a mid-20th century port city and a band with roots in American folklore fundamentally rewired the human experience of music.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Mhm.
Because to understand the sheer scale of that transformation, we can't just start with the music itself.
No, not at all. You have to look at the geographical and really the cultural soil where this entire movement germinated. We have to rewind to San Francisco in the 1950s and 1960s.
Right.
The city wasn't a static, completed project. The source actually specifically calls it a constantly updating experimental apparatus.
An experimental apparatus. I love that phrase. And I mean, that makes perfect sense for a major West Coast port city.
Exactly.
You inherently have this constant churn of sailors, immigrants, transient thinkers, and artists. It's just a natural crossroads of ideas.
And that crossroads became highly active right after World War II. Because, the 1950s in America were largely defined by this heavy push towards suburban conformity.
Oh, yeah. The white picket fence, the 9-to-5 job, all of that.
Right. But in San Francisco, specifically in neighborhoods like North Beach, the Beat generation took root. You had these poets and jazz musicians actively rejecting that suburban model. And they did something crucial. They blurred the lines between different artistic mediums.
So you're talking about the beatniks mixing spoken word and bebop jazz in the same clubs.
Yeah, exactly. But they weren't just sharing a venue. They were literally bleeding into one another. Poets started mimicking the syncopated, unpredictable rhythms of jazz in their writing.
Wow, okay.
And jazz musicians would improvise underneath the poetry. The baseline expectation in San Francisco became that art shouldn't stay in its designated lane. Fusing different types of expression was totally normal.
It's like the city was this giant cultural petri dish.
Yes, perfect analogy.
You have that foundational layer of the beat generation saying boundaries don't matter. Then you add the massive influx of youth in the 1960s.
Right, because San Francisco was surrounded by all these colleges.
Exactly. It drew in young people who were looking to escape the rigid conformity of the 50s. And they found their sanctuary in the Haight-Ashbury district.
And Haight-Ashbury was geographically and economically perfect for what was about to happen.
Because of the cheap rent?
Yeah, you had these massive, gorgeous Victorian houses that had fallen into total disrepair, so the rent was incredibly cheap. Young people could pool their money, rent a massive house, and just experiment with communal living.
They were totally rejecting the nuclear family model.
Exactly.
But because this youth culture was looking to escape the rigid social conditioning of the 1950s, it wasn't enough to just, share a house or listen to different music.
No, they wanted to go much further.
Right. They wanted to completely rewire how the human brain processed reality. And enter Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters.
Yeah, Kesey and his group realized that to break out of that societal conditioning, you needed to disrupt the senses entirely. So they began throwing these totally chaotic multimedia parties known as the acid tests.
Imagine you were walking into one of these events in 1965. You aren't just standing in a crowd watching a band.
Not at all.
You are getting hit with blinding strobe lights, massive tape delay sound loops, people covered in fluorescent paint, and, well, the widespread use of LSD. The goal was sensory overload.
Yeah, it was explicitly designed to break down your ego and alter your perception of reality.
Wow.
And in that environment, music completely sheds its role as mere entertainment. It becomes an active device to guide consciousness.
Right, because if you are throwing a party designed to shatter reality, you cannot just hire a standard, top 40 pop group to play it.
Definitely not. The music has to be as unpredictable and deeply immersive as the environment itself.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So who on earth do you hire for that gig?
Right. Who do you call?
Well, in 1965, a band formed specifically to play these acid tests. They call themselves the Warlocks, and their musical DNA is this wild, almost contradictory collision of influences.
It really is a bizarre mix.
You have their central figure, Jerry Garcia, whose background is heavily rooted in traditional acoustic folk and bluegrass banjo.
Which, I mean, feels entirely counterintuitive for an avant-garde, psychedelic multimedia freakout.
It really does. You expect some futuristic electronic noise, but instead you get bluegrass.
Yeah.
But then you mix Garcia's traditional folk roots with the other members, who bring heavy backgrounds in blues, avant-garde jazz, and country.
It mirrors that Port City experimental vibe of San Francisco itself.
Right.
Taking all these disparate American traditions and just throwing them into a blender.
Exactly. And then later that same year, they changed their name to the Grateful Dead.
And we really need to pause on that name because it is far more than just a clever marketing rebrand.
Oh, totally.
The name Grateful Dead is actually rooted in an ancient folklore motif. It appears across multiple cultures, but the core story is about a traveler who comes across a dead person with an unpaid debt.
Okay.
The traveler pays the debt out of their own pocket so the stranger can be properly buried, and then later the traveler is saved from some mortal danger by a mysterious figure.
Who turns out to be the spirit of the dead person they helped.
Exact.
A motif about repaying a debt to a stranger and receiving a cosmic reward. That is heavy.
It is a profound ideological declaration. By choosing that name, they were signaling their spiritual and communal values.
Right.
They were positioning themselves within a long human tradition of shared burdens, spiritual reciprocity, and community.
Okay, but let's look at the practical reality of this. You have a band grounded in American roots music carrying this heavy folklore ideology, playing in the middle of these chaotic, LSD-fueled acid tests where the audience is actively participating in the madness.
There's a lot to juggle.
To provide the soundtrack for that, they had to completely dismantle the traditional architecture of the live rock concert.
They systematically destroyed every single rule of live performance. And, I mean, the most immediate casualty was the set list.
They abandoned set lists entirely.
Yeah.
When they walked on stage, there was no master plan. The songs had this incredible fluidity.
Yeah.
They could play the same song 3 nights in a row, and it would have a completely different structure, tempo, and length every single time. Every show was designed to be a unique, once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Absolutely.
But wait, I have to push back here. Wait, no set lists and totally fluid song structures. How is that not just pure chaos or an unlistenable mess? I mean, I've heard bootlegs of jam bands where they just noodle aimlessly for 40 minutes.
Oh, sure.
If there's no plan and everyone is just doing their own thing, how does that not instantly devolve into a train wreck?
Well, because it absolutely did turn into a train wreck sometimes, and they openly admitted that. Yeah, that was the inherent danger of their method. If you are walking a tightrope without a net, occasionally you are going to fall.
Makes sense.
But what's fascinating here is that, to the untrained ear, improvisation sounds like everyone is just soloing at the same time. But the reality of what they were doing was the exact opposite of random chance.
So how do they keep it on the rails?
Through unbelievably high-level communication. True collective improvisation isn't about playing loud. It's about deep, microscopic listening.
Like really paying attention to each other.
Exactly. They were reading physical cues, making intense eye contact, picking up on tiny shifts in a guitar tone, and adjusting their timing in milliseconds to match the drummer.
Wow.
The source beautifully calls it an accumulation of relationships. The music evolving organically on stage was a direct, real-time reflection of the trust and interpersonal dynamics between the band members.
It reminds me of a flock of birds turning all at once in the sky. They aren't following a flight plan, you know? They are instantly reacting to the movements of the bird right next to them.
That's a great way to picture it.
But if you have this delicate, real-time musical conversation happening, the audience has to be able to hear it perfectly. And in the late 1960s and early 70s, concert audio was notoriously atrocious.
Oh, it was awful. Stadium PA systems back then were essentially just glorified megaphones. They were designed to amplify vocals, not a 6-piece band playing dynamic, improvised music.
Right.
If you were standing in the back of a venue, you were basically just getting hit with a wall of distorted, muddy noise.
Which totally ruins the immersive, reality-altering experience they were trying to build. So they had to push the boundaries of technology.
It really did.
In the 1970s, they debuted the Wall of Sound. This was a monstrous physical structure. We're talking over 600 individual speakers stacked up behind the band, weighing over 70 tons.
And placing the speakers behind the band is the critical detail here.
Okay, why?
Well, historically, you put speakers in front of the band pointing at the audience. If you put microphones in front of speakers, you get that horrible, piercing microphone feedback.
Right, the screech that makes everyone cover their ears.
Yeah.
How did they avoid that with a massive wall of speakers directly behind their microphones?
They used a brilliant piece of technology, phase-canceling microphones.
Phase canceling.
Yeah. They taped two identical microphones together, wired out of phase. The singer sang into one mic, which picked up the vocal and the ambient background noise from the speakers.
Okay, I'm following.
The second mic only picked up the ambient background noise. When the signals were combined, the background noise canceled itself out entirely. The only thing left was the pristine, isolated vocal.
That is incredible engineering. Because of that phase cancellation, they didn't need separate monitor speakers on stage.
Exactly.
The band heard the exact same pristine, distortion-free mix that the audience heard. The sound literally constructed the physical space. They turned the entire stage into one giant acoustic instrument, building an environment out of sound waves.
And if you have a philosophy of complete audio transparency on stage, you can't exactly treat your audience like passive consumers.
No, you really can't.
That level of transparency naturally extends out into the crowd, and that birthed a highly unique social structure.
The Deadheads. The fans who transformed from passive ticket buyers into an active, self-sustaining community.
Yep.
And this all hinges on a massive, industry-breaking decision. The band uniquely allowed fans to bring recording equipment to the shows to tape the live performances.
Which was unheard of. In the traditional music industry, live bootlegs were considered outright theft. Record labels aggressively prosecuted tapers.
But the Grateful Dead essentially set up designated taping sections behind the soundboard.
They embraced it because every single show was a unique, improvised, once-in-a-lifetime experience. Those cassette tapes became incredibly valuable historical documents.
Well, for sure.
Fans started trading these tapes through the mail, and by doing that, they completely freed the music from centralized corporate distribution.
So what does this all mean? It sounds like they basically invented open source software, but for live music.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the open source analogy is actually the perfect lens for this. Think about how open source works. A developer releases the core code, and a community of users takes it, debugs it, maps it out, and builds new applications on top of it.
Right.
The fans weren't just passively consuming the tapes, they were analyzing them.
Yeah, they were creating detailed J-cards with intricate set lists, noting the exact minute a certain improvised jam transitioned into another song. They published their own zines and newsletters. They built an entirely decentralized distribution network based on strict ethical rules. Like, you could trade tapes or send blank tapes and postage, but if you sold a tape for profit, you were shunned.
The fans literally became the developers of the culture. The band's tours evolved into a moving municipality.
A moving municipality.
Yeah, it wasn't just a rock group traveling from city to city anymore. It was an entire ecosystem moving across the country. Fans created their own economic zones in the parking lots, known as Shakedown Street.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, they were selling food, handmade clothes, and art just to fund their travel to the next city. The source explicitly states the fans were both the bearers and the creators of the culture.
This whole ecosystem was thriving alongside what became known as the San Francisco Sound, involving contemporaries like Jefferson Airplane and Janis Joplin coming out of that same North Beach and Haight-Ashbury scene.
Right, they were all part of that soup.
They were completely dismantling musical genres. Blues, folk, rock, and jazz fused together until those old classifications just lost their meaning. The sound was defined by the place, by that San Francisco freedom.
Absolutely.
But of course, you can't keep a cultural explosion of that magnitude a secret forever. The whole thing hits the global spotlight in 1967 with the Summer of Love.
And the Summer of Love fundamentally altered the trajectory of the movement.
Yeah.
San Francisco became world famous practically overnight.
Which sounds like a good thing, but...
Well, suddenly, tens of thousands of teenagers flocked to the Haight-Ashbury district. But that fame brought immense tourism and heavy commercialization. Tour buses literally started driving through the neighborhood so people could gawk at the hippies.
The underground utopia became a literal tourist attraction. The original ideals of that anti-consumerist experiment were diluted by an influx of people who just wanted to wear the clothes and do the drugs without understanding the communal philosophy.
This raises an important question. How does a movement survive when its physical reality, its neighborhood, no longer matches its founding ideals?
That's a tough spot to be in.
The original spark was being mass-produced and sold on T-shirts. If they had just kept playing the same chaotic psychedelic music, they would have burned out entirely.
Because success does not guarantee continuation. To survive the transition into the 1970s, they had to evolve.
Yes.
Musically, they actually retreated from the heavy LSD-driven noise and returned to those earlier country and Americana roots. They released albums focusing on acoustic guitars and tight vocal harmonies.
But the key is that they kept the core of improvisation alive within that new structure. As the source notes, continuing while changing was the style itself.
Continuing while changing.
Yeah. They codified the tour culture. They made the live experience, that moving nomadic community, the absolute center of their existence, rather than relying on a geographical neighborhood in San Francisco that had already been lost to commercialization.
They outgrew the Petri dish and became a fully self-sufficient traveling ecosystem. And that ecosystem sustained itself for decades, all the way until a massive turning point in 1995.
The death of Jerry Garcia.
Right. For a movement so heavily tied to its central figure, you would assume that would be the definitive end of the road.
Well, for a traditional rock band, the death of the lead guitarist and vocalist is the end. But because the fans were the active creators of the culture, the source has this really powerful conclusion.
What does it say?
It says the end was not a severance, but a transition to another form. The culture was vastly larger than the individuals on stage.
The DNA of what they built in San Francisco, that open source sharing, the massive parking lot economies, the fiercely independent DIY spirit, it was all fully inherited.
Oh, completely.
The modern jam band scene, the entire structure of multi-day immersive music festivals, all of it grew directly out of the blueprint they created. The idea that music can blur the boundaries of society, economy, and community was permanently out there in the wild.
They proved a fundamental truth. Music isn't just an art form to be consumed. It is an active, organizing force that can literally shape and build a functioning society.
And that brings us right back to you, listening to this deep dive right now. Think about the last time you packed up a car and drove out to a multi-day festival to camp in the dirt with thousands of strangers. Think about the massive online communities sharing unreleased files, or the feeling that the fan base you belong to is a tighter, more supportive community than your own physical neighborhood. You are experiencing the direct ripples of that mid-century San Francisco experiment.
And, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. We spent all this time detailing how this deeply connected, thriving physical community was built.
Right.
And they built it through the incredibly slow, high-friction analog trading of cassette tapes through the Postal Service, traveling thousands of miles across the country in the 1970s and 80s.
They were mapping out tape lineages and passing physical plastic cassettes hand to hand.
It took massive effort. So look at us today. We live in an era of instant, frictionless, global digital connection. We can share a perfectly polished, pristine audio file with 1 million people in 1 second.
Yeah, effortlessly.
And yet there is a pervasive sense that people feel more isolated and disconnected than ever before.
Wow, yeah.
Could it be that the secret to true, lasting community doesn't actually lie in the flawless perfection of a digital product? Could it be that true human connection actually requires friction? That we need the messy, shared, unpredictable experience of a fleeting moment to actually bond with one another?
Are we trading the messy, vibrant reality of the Petri dish for a clean, sterile digital room? It's a huge question.
Yeah.
You really have to wonder if, in our quest for perfect convenience, we've lost that ability to just inhabit the noise together.
Exactly.
Definitely something to think about the next time you hit play on a perfectly polished track and put your headphones on. Thanks for taking this trip with us today, and we'll catch you on the next Deep Dive.